Hey guys, I wanted to quickly show you something really interesting about Claude Code around leveling up your code review skills. And let me just start by showing you what I got Claude Code to do. So here I have my app, AudioWave. It lets you uh, upload like an EPUB in this case, or you can get like a text URL, and then it will create a project around it and let you convert it to audio. So far makes sense, and we'll do that in just a second here. So here it's split up into multiple chapters, and what I got it to do is also the first chapter is usually the title itself. We don't need to show that the title page as a chapter by itself. And then it compressed things like, so here I have like part one here. So that's the first part of the book. We don't have a hierarchy in the system, so I got it to collapse it to like a single level. It flattened it into one level here, and then it will do that with part two. It just gets the first chapter that's adjacent to it, and it will collapse it into part two. And that's when so we can convert it to audio. It will just say part two coffee chats, and then it will read like chapter one and read the chapter, and it loads all the images and does all its things. So far so good. So that was the task. It was to improve the quality of EPUBs. Before that, it was just using a very simple mechanism to load the different sections of the EPUB and smush them together. Cool. So as I was reviewing the code, I noticed a couple of interesting things. But before we even get there, let's quickly talk about how I started building this. So here I have my PRD. In here, so I created a product requirements document, described how I want to like split different chapters, make them adjacent together. Talks about like how we use Markdown to determine the chapters and convert things to from EPUB to Markdown. But we want to maintain some of the structure there as well. So far so good. It talks about like image processing, and getting things like the cover from it, and it talks about maintaining backwards compatibility for image processing. So remember that part, because that's going to be important in just a second to what I'll show you here. The other and then we just have like normal things, and then we have the planning document, and you can just see the plan here. Look at some code and did the plan. So we did all of that with Claude Code. Here in the browser, I have an instance running, and I have it generating tests as well. So if we look at my Claude.md, it has a whole process of how I want it to go about implementing it. So it actually, we pull up a linear ticket, we create these PRDs, and then we ask some questions. We tells when user approval is needed for what, how to implement, how to run tests, and so on. And it did a pretty good job, because what you saw is there. But then I started to kind of look at the code itself, and I noticed a couple of really interesting things. So first off, if I just went by GitHub itself and used their diff tool, which I would usually use for normal human code reviews, I would just look at GitHub. But it's pretty massive, even though some of these things were just a requirement document, so there's not much review needed. I already reviewed them at one point, so not much review is needed there. But sometimes these files don't even load in some of my PRs. So that's not going to work. So instead of that, I recommend just using the built-in GitHub code review section in your editor. In my case, it's Windsurf, but it's the same in any VS Code base like Cursor or VS Code itself. And you can just skip certain things that aren't important. But the best way to do code reviews is to actually go with the flow of the code itself. In this case, it's an XJS application in here, and you can immediately see that I have a project here, API, and I have a route, and that's kind of the first layer to take a look at. So I can look here and see what what has changed in here, and you can see this section was added. I'm gonna go to the actual file because it's just a bit easier to see what's going on here. And if we find the post section, which is here, we see that it added this part here, which is kind of interesting. If you remember, we actually end up processing the file. So we load some information about the file right here, and then we check if is it a file that we're uploading? Is it a URL? Or is it just text? And we do different things in these branches here. So it added this little part here, which is really interesting. It checks if it's an EPUB here. If it's not an EPUB, it processes the file, but an EPUB is a file. So that's kind of interesting, right? So that in itself is interesting. So the process file method in this file here. Let's take a look at it here. What it does, it also looks for an EPUB, and it gets the markdown file from this extract content from EPUB method. Okay, that's pretty interesting. But if we look back at right here, we see that it called this extract enhanced content from EPUB method. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Let's take a look there. What is that? And then it just says that it's enhanced it to use the table of content, the OCS table of contents. And this right here is the previous implementation. And it's telling you right here that it was trying to maintain backwards compatibility. Remember in the prompt, we told it to maintain backwards compatibility for image uploads. Well, that's not an image. And for other file uploads, so that doesn't make much sense. So right here, so that's kind of interesting in itself. And like right away, that's a problem, because in some cases, in this process file, we end up calling the old method to process EPUBs and extract the markdown from them. And then in the new one, so we have two branches of code. It happens in, so there's a couple of edge cases here. Like for example, when we get a URL in here, if we look at the process URL method, we can get a URL to an actual file here. So right here, we load the file up and then we process that file. And that process file method still goes to our old method. So that's pretty interesting there. And then we have this whole like library here that we adopted from somewhere else online and modified it a bunch to parse EPUBs. And right down here, it added a bunch of things, but it also does some weird things, like why did it remove this private variable here? So that's kind of interesting, all these kind of questions. So my point is, we need to take this whole thing with a grain of salt in here. It's when you see it here, it's not as big of a deal to see what's going on. We also can easily see that even though it created some tests for this parse test, and it did some stuff with, we had a bug before, and it was the way that it parses metadata. The parser wasn't handling one of the instances that you had something like this in there. So it solved that. And it wrote all these tests, which is pretty wonderful. I think I had to modify it to simplify it. But it's missing tests for this EPUB extractor there. So I can ask it to create those and like really watch what it's doing in here. The other mistake I think I made here was that this PRD was a bit too big. Like it was a bit too vague. There's a lot of different types of EPUBs, and we could have made it a little bit smaller and kind of negotiate with it like a V1 implementation. And that's kind of what we're probably going to do. We're going to just crush it down to something smaller that works, improves things, ship it, and then I'll iterate over it again. Anyway, yeah, hope you found this useful. Thanks, guys. Keep on coding. Bye.